Hello, my name is Dr. Max Lebrun. I'm Red River Métis or Michif, as well as white settler from Treaty 6 territory, but I now live and work in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador in partnership with the Inuit government, which is the Inuit self-governing group in Northern Labrador, and together we work on community-based plastic pollution monitoring. Today I'm going to talk about some of the infrastructure that lets us be in good relations in our partnership. One of the big issues with research partnerships between Indigenous and university groups is that the power relations always tend to fall and benefit the researchers out of universities more than the researchers in community. And good intent is not actually good enough, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. So I'm going to talk about the things we actually do to make things good. And hopefully these are useful to as broad a range of people and partnerships as possible. So the first thing that I'm not going to include as recommended infrastructure, because it's very context dependent, is that my research partner, Liz Piugi, works for the Inuit government. She is the Northern Contaminants research coordinator. Our project is part of her job description, and we make decisions together. So there's someone in community who knows and is the project who has decision-making power. More commonly, there are infrastructures like Indigenous research boards that review research that happened on their lands and territories. In the case of the Inuit government, their first step is to redirect or refine research so it's beneficial, and specifically to avoid duplication or fatigue in the community, because there's a lot of that, duplication in particular, people doing the same climate change research, for instance. And in the case of the Inuit Government Research Advisory Council, NGARC, these are the requirements on all projects that happen in Inuit, and then sometimes they'll also stipulate additional ones. The first one is that all research materials, from your reports to your one-pagers to your consent forms, have to be translated into Labrador and Inuttitut. You have to provide copies of all research data and publications to them. You have to include a land acknowledgement, and you have to provide them copies of photographs for their digital archives. Sometimes there are additional requirements. In the case of providing all research data, because that often doesn't go well, which I'll talk about in a minute, our group additionally has an Indigenous data sovereignty contract or agreement. This is a legally binding contract between the university and the community. This can be a group or a government, doesn't have to be a formal government, where the Indigenous group gets to control, have access to, and possess their data, as is their right. These are based on existing contracts in university for industries, which do have these rights, industry collaborations. And so it's not a big leap to change those contracts for Indigenous groups. Memorial also has a template on their website for this. And we return our data annually, and it includes a whole lot of metadata, how to use the data, and the methods for putting the data together, without which the data is useless. Nutsuvut has recently done a study that even though the NGARC requires people to return their data, only 18% of all data is returned. And of people who promise they will return it, only 33% still do, right? And so this is why infrastructure is so important and is more important than intent or nice words. We want the actual concrete things that make it happen. You can stipulate in your research agreements, whether that is with funders or between the university and the community, with the percentage of funding or equipment or materials, et cetera, to leave in community, and stipulate who gets to benefit from the resources that go into community and research. Some funding agencies can, of course, directly fund community, and then you don't have to worry about it. But if it has to go through the university and then get transferred out or spent out of the university, you can stipulate those amounts. By the way, ArcticNet's North by North program requires, I believe, 80% of funding to be left in the North and in the hands of Northerners. So 80% is a logical bar for that percent. And we've had projects where it's 100%. So hiring community members. One of the claims that researchers sometimes make is that community members aren't trained enough. That is bullshit. Universities are training institutions. It is our job to train people. Training is not a problem. It is actually the problem we are set to solve. So it can be overcome. But even as such, things like liaisons, coordinators between community and the research group, those are properly and only properly done by community members. Can also include technicians and researchers, photographers, translators. There's all sorts of caterers. There's all sorts of different labor that you can hire community members for, and you can set the rates for those in your contracts. We tend to do the community standard plus 15%. And finally, one of the issues that happens a lot is that even though community work and intellectual property and knowledge is used, the university researchers' names end up on everything. And so outlining the principles of attribution, including things like co-authorship for community work and knowledge, is really important. And these are not mutually exclusive. Co-authorship, payment, citation, acknowledgement, those can all happen. You don't pick one. We have a specific co-authorship group to talk with different community members about, and community groups about how they want to be acknowledged. We currently have a report with over 100 co-authors on it because lots of people were involved in the sampling design, getting samples, getting fish, that sort of thing. I hope these are useful. These all have precedents. There might be arguments against them, but there are just as many examples of how they work. And if you have any questions, please email me. I love to share these resources. Again, my name is Dr. Max de Baron. I work at Memorial University in partnership with the Not Civic government. Thank you.